Right. If you are, then what I'll ask for the live stream started. So then we.
All right.
So if you're ready to start.
About that bit, I get the steam engine running. Yeah. All right. Right. In that case, we'll.
Just one moment.
Right.
I know I'm a pain. Can we start the live stream now, please?
Great. And welcome to the meeting of North Tyneside Council's licensing subcommittee, which is a virtual licensing subcommittee this morning. Because of the COVID virus situation, the government has agreed that we can hold them online. I'd like to inform everyone that it's being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. This is to meet the requirements of the new regulations that all members of the public must, as a minimum, be able to hear the proceedings of the meeting. Before we move into the agenda, I'm now going to ask everyone present to briefly introduce themselves so that everyone can identify with the participants at the meeting. Can I start with, well, I'll start with...
I'm Councillor Janet Hunter,
Right,
Local Ward
right.
Councillor.
I'm Councillor Willie Samuel. I'm Councillor for Vice Chair of the committee and also Councillor for Colour Codes.
Right. Can we go to the licensing officer next?
Morning, Chair. I'm Gary Callum, the licensing officer for North Tyneside Council.
And we now go to the police.
Good morning, Chair. My name's Mark Story. I'm the Neighbourhood Inspector for Wallsend and Killingworth in North Tyneside.
Good morning. My name's Helen Thompson. I'm solicitor for the police.
Right, thank you. Now to the solicitor for the applicant. Sorry, can't hear you.
That's better. Good morning, Chair. My name is Matthew Foster. I'm a solicitor on behalf of the respondent to the review, PJK Limited, and I represent the premises.
Right, and I think it was the applicant themselves next. Mr. Milne.
Hi, my name's Alan Milne, the director of PG Kittens.
Right, and then can we go to Mr. Thompson, I think it is. No, it's Mrs. Thompson. It was Mr. Robson.
So it's Charles Robinson, Director PJ
Robinson.
Haynes Limited.
Charles Robinson, right. Right. Our legal advisor.
Hello, I'm John Barton, a lawyer at North Tyneside Council, and I'm here to provide legal advice to the subcommittee if called upon to do so.
And our Democratic Support Officer.
Morning, I'm Dave Park, and I'm the Democratic Support Officer for this meeting. Thank you.
And have I missed anyone?
Yes, Chair, if I may. Good morning, Chair. My name's Tim Robson. I'm a licensing consultant. I act on behalf of the director of the Barking Dog Public House. Thank you.
Right, thanks.
Chair, there's also on the call Neil Kirkpatrick, who is the licensing coordinator for Northumbria Police. His device doesn't have a camera, so you won't be able to see him, but he can speak if needed.
Right, that's fair enough. So we've got, right. You'll have to bear with me because this is very difficult to try to keep track of everybody, right? I'll go back to me directive, right? As far as the committee is concerned, the chair myself will invite representatives to introduce themselves, which I've already done. And the etiquette for the committee is that we'll only have one speaker at one time. And please say your name before you actually say anything. And normally I would invite you to speak, but if there is a point where you feel you must sort of chip in, as it were, please feel free to actually mention your name and I'll try to get you in if and when sort of thing, right? And that's for specific points, as it were. Right, I'll now go on to the licensing committee itself. As I've said, I'm the chair of the committee, Councillor Tommy Mulvenna, and the committee is here this morning to review the license, the premises license for the Barking Dog, Kings Road North, Wallsend. The procedure for the meeting itself is that the licensing officer will give his report. Everyone is allowed to then ask questions. We then move on to the applicant for the review, that's the police, and it's the same situation with that. We will then move on to the premises rebuttal. Same situation where everyone is allowed to ask questions. We will then try to tie up everything, and we will then go into the, dare I say, the lockdown. At the end, everyone is given the chance to put forward their total case, as it were. The main thing is that the licensing committee operates within the licensing objectives, and we're all aware of the licensing objectives, or we should be aware of the licensing objectives and within the various regulations. So in order to get the committee off the ground, I will ask Mr. Callum, our licensing officer, to present his. Mr. Callum.
Chair, just before we start and Mr. Callum presents the report, I do have an application on behalf of the police to request that part of the hearing go into private, as the police wish to show CCTV. The request is made under Regulation 14 of the Hearing Regs 2005, and it's in the public interest that the CCTV is not shown to them on the live stream.
Right. I'll consult with my colleagues. Councillor Samuel, have you any objection to that?
No objection, Chair.
Councillor Hunter?
No, none at all.
The solicitor, I doubt, for the applicant, I doubt whether you have an objection.
No objection, Chair.
Right. Does anyone have an objection? If so, raise your hand. That's the easiest way. Right. There's no objection to that, so yes, we will do that under that particular regulation. Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. Can we now go to the licensing officer for his report?
Thank you, Chair. The subcommittee is asked to consider and determine an application from the Chief Officer of Police for the review of a premises licence for the Barking Dog held by PJK Inns Limited. A representative of the Chief Officer of Police has been invited to attend the hearing and to address the subcommittee on the review application. A representative from the premises licence holder has also been invited to attend the meeting. Representations from responsible authorities and other parties. The applicant for a review is required to forward copies of the application to Local Planning Authority, Environmental Health Authority, Health and Safety, Environment Agency, Licensing Authority, the Local Weights and Measures Authority, Director of Public Health, Fire Authority and North Tyneside Safeguarding Partnership and the Home Office Immigration Department, with a view to any of these responsible authorities making a supporting representation if deemed appropriate. No representations have been received from any other responsible authorities or other persons. In addition, the application has been advertised by the local licensing authority at the premises, the main offices of the authority and on the authority's website as prescribed. In relation to the application for the review of a premises licence, the subcommittee can take the following steps, if any, under section 52(4) of the Licensing Act 2003. They can modify the conditions on the licence. They can exclude a licensable activity from the scope of the licence, remove the designated premises supervisor, suspend the licence for a period of not more than 3 months, or revoke the licence. Once the subcommittee has reached a decision, the decision and reasons for the decision must be given in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003 and the Licensing Act 2003 Hearings Regulations 2005. This report relates to an application by the Chief Officer of Police for the review of a premises licence for the barking dog held by PJK Inns Limited. The application for review and supporting information are attached at Appendix 1. A plan of the premises is attached at Appendix 2, and the map of the area is attached at Appendix 3. The current premises licence is attached at Appendix 4. The application for the review of the premises licence is also made under pursuant to Section 51 of the Licensing Act, and the relevant section of the Act dealing with the determination of such an application is contained in Section 52 of the Act. The grounds for the review are that the prevention of crime and disorder and the protection of children from harm, the licensing objectives are not being promoted by the premises licence holder. The current premises licence in respect of the barking dog allows the following: to permit the premises to supply alcohol on and off the premises, the performance of dance, the provision of facilities for dancing, indoor sporting events, provision of facilities for making music, performance of live music, playing of recorded music, entertainment of similar description to live music, recorded music, and performance of dance, provision of facilities for entertainment of similar description to live music, and recorded music and performance of dance and late night refreshment. The times for these are Monday to Wednesday from 11 AM till 11 PM, Thursday to Saturday from 11 AM to 1 AM, and Sunday from 11 to midnight. The non-standard times are from 11 on a Sunday, which falls immediately before a bank holiday Monday, to 1:30 on a Monday AM, and from 11 AM on a New Year's Eve until 11 on New Year's Day. And the opening hours of the premises are Monday to Wednesday, 11 AM till 11:30 PM, Thursday to Saturday, 11 till 1:30 AM, and Sunday from 11 AM to 1 AM. And the non-standard opening hours are from 12 PM on a Sunday, which falls immediately before a bank holiday Monday, to 1:30 on the following Monday, and from 11 AM on New Year's Eve until 11 AM on New Year's Day. On the 9th of March 2020, which was when the original application was made, an application was submitted to the authority to vary the DPS at the barking dog. The notice of the application was provided to Northumbria Police the following day, where the Chief Officer of Police is satisfied that the exceptional circumstances of the case are such that granting an application would undermine the crime prevention objective. He must give the relevant licensing authority a notice stating the reasons why he is so satisfied within 14 days of receipt of the application. And if such a notice is received from the Chief Officer of Police, there will be a need for a hearing to determine the application to vary the DPS. The authority have not received any support and representations from anybody other than the police, and the application for consideration, or that the application for the review of the premises licence, is for the barking dog PJK Inns. Chair, since the application was originally made, the original application for the DPS has now been varied again, and I understand that the applicant for the DPS is now Charles Jeffrey Robinson. And that is the report for the committee chair.
Does anyone have any questions of the licensing officer? Please raise your hand if you do. No? Then, if that's the case, we'll now move on to the police. For your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, in relation to the application on behalf of police, I just want to confirm that the application consists of the application itself, which is dated 29th of January. There is then some logs that include the incidences. There is then copies of refusal notes that have been provided to the police. There's also then the current and historic crime table and a witness statement from Inspector Story. Chair, perhaps it would be pertinent this time to show the CCTV to allow the hearing to go into private for that to be shown, as it may be that CCTV is referred to in henceforward.
Right. Mr. Parkin, are you available?
I am, Chair.
And-
Can we pause the live stream? And I'll come back and say when we want to restart it, if that's okay. Can we start the live stream again, please? Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just to clarify for the purpose of all present, the incident that has just been seen on the CCTV is the incident that's referred to in the application of dated the Friday the 26th of October 2018. You'll note in relation to the incident that occurred at 2:47 in the morning, which is well after the licensable hours of this premise. Chair, what I would intend to do is to ask Inspector Story a number of statements just in relation to the application, in relation to specifically his witness statement, to present the application on behalf of the police.
Right, fair enough. Inspector Story.
Thank you. Inspector, one of the things I just want to clarify first of all on your witness statement, just for clarification, is the date of the witness statement. The witness statement is dated the 7th of June 2018. Can you just confirm that that's an error?
Yes, for the all present, I can confirm that's an error. This statement was made after October 2019 because obviously lots of the incidents refer to were dated as such. So that is incorrect, the date on the statement that I've provided.
Thank you. On the second page of your statement, you said there was a meeting held on the 13th of November and it was held in your office. Could you just confirm that you were present at that meeting?
That's correct. I was present with Mr. Paul Harrison and Neil Kirkpatrick, the licensing officer.
What was the purpose of that meeting?
Basically, as a result of the CCTV that everybody's just viewed, I was made aware from obviously reviewing incidents of crime and disorder that was a serious assault had occurred in the premises. This follows historic reports of underage drinking from 2017 onwards, and this incident prompted me to speak to the management of this premises with a view to discussing how we could better improve the prevention of crime and disorder at the premises.
Why was the decision taken to have a meeting rather than to submit a review?
To give the staff and the management and the owners a chance to work with the police. Obviously, we have a good working relationship with licensed public houses in North Tyneside, and it was a first meeting with Mr. Harrison. I'd never met the man before, just to discuss the issues and the concerns I had and what we needed to do to improve things moving forward.
There was then a follow-up meeting, which is referred to on the third page of your statement at the top on the 19th of March, and you say you were present at that meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was the purpose of that meeting?
That again was basically holding another meeting with Mr. Harrison, and this time Chris, the current DPS, the bar manager, was present. And I've just basically informed Mr. Harrison that we're still receiving community intelligence, that there was underage drinking was still an issue at the premises, as were lock-ins. In the incident report on the 18th of March 2019, the premises was discussed. Basically, there was an incident, an 18th birthday party, I believe, was held at the premises, and a male had been assaulted in the toilets. So from my perspective, things weren't improving as promised in the original meeting.
Between November and March, had you seen any improvement at all in relation to the management of the premise?
Not with the continuing violent assaults that were happening in the premises, no. Obviously, I manage half of North Tyneside, the whole of Wallsend and Killingworth sectors. And this public house was the one that was causing me, also had the greatest concern for at that time.
In relation to continued concerns, they obviously continued after March, as you've outlined in relation to your statement, such that the police then felt that a review application was necessary. Is that right?
That's correct.
I just want to refer to the incident of October, 6th of October 2019. Are you able to provide any update in relation to this incident?
As provided the details in my statement, the report was made to the police. I think it came from the ambulance of a serious assault that happened outside the Barking Dog public house, where two persons were violently assaulted by people that had been in the public house prior to the assault. I was made aware of it, and I consulted with the officer in charge of the investigation from CID. And basically, it became apparent that persons that had been drinking in the public house prior to the assault had come out and acted in another violent, disorderly and violent manner towards members of the public. So it was right, okay, this is the last straw. There's been two meetings. The previous meeting, we were warned that if there was any further continued issues, we would seek a review of the licence. This last incident on the 6th of October was, in my opinion, a really, really nasty incident, and it could have resulted in somebody dying.
Between the date of October to the January when the review application was made, was there any further instance or any further information that you received with related to problems or concerns at the Barking Dog?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Since the review has been put in, has there been any concerns in relation to the Barking Dog?
I can confirm there have been no reports to the police.
Have you had the opportunity to read the statement of Mr. Milne?
I have, yes.
There's a number of matters which Mr. Milne states in relation to his statement, which he says he's put in place since the review has been put in. How do you respond to those matters that have been put in?
I've never met Mr. Milne before. Good morning, Mr. Milne. I see you're on the screen there. I'm quite encouraged by the measure that you put in place since you were informed that there was a review to take place. If I'm honest, I know this was not something that you had responsibility for, but if these measures had been put in place by Mr. Harrison several years ago, maybe we wouldn't be in this position, but I'm certainly encouraged by the measures you put in place since being informed of the review. Thank you.
Is there anything else that you'd wish to add in relation to the concerns of Northumbria Police that's not contained in the application in relation to the Barking Dog?
No.
Thank you. Chair, the majority of the issues that I wish to raise further would be more for a submission point. The committee has the application on behalf of Northumbria Police. You'll obviously know what those concerns are. We've gone through them with Mr. Story and obviously they are Inspector Story, and they are detailed within the application. I don't intend on asking anything further, as I think the application speaks for itself as to reasons why this application is brought for review and why the police seek, as they do, a revocation of the premises licence for the Barking Dog. And what I'd ask, therefore, is if there's any questions of Inspector Story at this time, and as I say, further submissions will be made and in my closing remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Councillor Samuel, do you have any questions?
Just one, if I may. You've indicated that since the new responsible person took over, you'd encouraged that things may have improved, and yet you persisted with asking for the licence to be removed. Is there a reason for that? Are you concerned beyond the management of the premises or something like that?
Well, we haven't seen, obviously it's been a bit difficult, Councillor, with the lockdown because obviously the pub's been shut, but I would like to have, in normal circumstances, have some visits to the premises just to make sure. I know Mr. Milne said he's attempted to change the clientele that were there. If I'm honest with you, one of my main concerns was the clientele that were getting there and turning up late in the evening once some of the other pubs had shut, that Mr. Milne has actually identified in his statement. I would have liked to have satisfied myself a little bit more that was the case from a police perspective, and it was just, to be honest with you, the catalyst was actually, if it had been a relatively minor incident, the last one on the 6th of October, maybe we could have a discussion, but it was a really nasty, serious assault. As I say, so, the victim went into cardiac arrest and had seizures, etc. It could have quite easily been a murder investigation, if I'm honest with you, for the level of injury. And it was something, right, okay, I took the view that we need to come before yourselves and discuss, potential revocation of the licence, or certainly discussing conditions, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hunter?
Well, that would have been my question, but I'll do a follow-up one. What action did the police take following that incident?
For the most recent incident, the assault that I've just mentioned, there was 2 arrests have been made. Obviously, it was fully investigated by CID. There's 1 person being released, no further action, but the main offender, the suspect, will have. He'll be going to court and be dealt with. Obviously, there's a trial to go ahead with that, so there hasn't been a result as of yet. But there's certainly one suspect has been identified and dealt with.
Thank you.
Mr. Callum, do you have any questions? Come in, Mr. Callum. Do you have any questions,
Sorry.
Mr. Callum?
No, Chair, I haven't, no.
Right. Mr. Foster?
Yes, Chair.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I have a number of questions. Thank you. Inspector Story, you you state that you're aware that Mr. Mill and Mr. Robinson had no involvement in the premises prior to Mr. Harrison sadly passing away. That's correct?
That's my understanding, yes. I certainly haven't had any discussions with both those persons.
And what efforts were made to contact them following Mr. Harrison's death, just to update them on what had historically happened at the premises?
I was led to believe that Mr. Harrison had made contact in all the discussions that we had, the 2 meetings that we had, etc., with the other interested parties. It certainly would have been a responsibility of mine to make sure that those persons were contacted. I take your point. After his passing, I wasn't made aware of Mr. Harrison's passing for several months after his passing, if I'm honest with you. So it wasn't something that I was involved with or discussed. I don't know whether Mr. Kirkpatrick, the licensing officer, could shed any further light on that, but it was certainly several months after he passed that I was made aware of that.
Mm-hmm. A meeting was arranged in October to meet with Mr. Mill and Mr. Robinson about the premises. Why was that meeting cancelled?
I can't recall. To be honest with you, I don't recall. I don't know whether it was a meeting with Mr. Kirkpatrick and the owners or myself. I can't recall, if I'm honest with you. Sometimes Neil will have meetings himself, and sometimes it'll be he'll ask my attendance, etc., or I'll ask for him to organise a meeting. I actually don't recall organising a meeting for October. So it might have just been with Neil Kirkpatrick, the licensing officer.
Okay. You say that you're encouraged by the improvements which have been made at the premises by the current operators.
Yes.
And I'm presuming that the feedback we received in regards to our proposals and conditions was following consultation with you.
In part consultation with me, yes.
Yes. The incident of the 6th of October, it states that it was an unknown male. I'm not going to use any names here, so obviously we're live on the internet, but this is in fact a known male to the police.
It is, yes, I can confirm that.
And he is involved in a disproportionate amount of crime. Would that be fair to say?
He is well known to the police, involved in crime and disorder, yes, and violence. That would be fair to say.
He's the same man who's named in a number of the incident reports attached to your paperwork.
I can confirm that, yes. Yes.
Are you aware of the advice which was given by Mr. Kirkpatrick on the 8th of August to my client with regards to that particular individual?
Was that in relation?
It was in regards to his being. Yes, it was regards to his being barred on pub watch, and the advice was given in the presence of Mr. Milne and Mr. Robinson, was that if you're having a problem with him, to let him have a drink and then let him go on his way.
Yes, I have been made aware of that advice. What I can say about that is it's not the advice that I would have given, but I can understand why Neil Kirkpatrick's given that advice to possibly reduce the possible confrontation with staff at the bar. I can understand why he's done that. You know, it's not something I would have given, but I understand why it's given. I accept that advice was given, yes.
Do you see that as then being an important factor in the backdrop to that incident on the 6th of October, which involved that man? It
certainly would have been a contributing factor, i.e., you know, in an ideal world, he should have been asked to leave and that would have been it. Whether we would have remained outside, I don't know. But certainly, if he was in the premises, you know, that advice didn't help things, if I'm honest with you.
In regards to the figures you've provided in regards to crimes, current historic crimes listed behind your witness statements. It says there was 3 crimes in 2017, 10 reported in 2018. Obviously, we don't have details of those. And then it goes on to say that there was 11 crimes between January 2019 and October 2019. It then goes on to say that 2 crimes were not associated with the premises. So does that then take it down to 9 crimes in that case?
What I can say with this, I think this part of this evidence wasn't my evidence. I think Neil Kirkpatrick's provided this. So I would have to have a little look. But if two of those crimes were not associated with the premise, I'm not sure. I think Mr. Kirkpatrick's on. I don't know if it'd be worth asking him. I apologise for that.
Well, I'm happy for Mr. Kirkpatrick to give some evidence afterwards on this, if you'd like. Going down the list of crimes that you've got, we have 2 on the 6th of October. Those are the ones we've just referred to, involving that known individual banned on pub watch, where advice was given that he could have a pint in the pub if he was being a problem.
Yes, looking at that, there was basically the Section 18 assault was the boyfriend or the partner, and the Section 47 assault was the female. So there was 2 victims in that assault. There was one incident that confirmed with 2 victims. It would have been crime twice. Okay. It wasn't 2 different incidents, so that clarifies things. It was 1 incident with 2 crimes.
Because there were 2 assaults. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
With the incidents of the 25th of August, similarly, we have what looks like 1 incident and 2 reported crimes. Is that correct?
Yes, I can confirm that is correct.
Okay, so that's another one incident. The incident of the 25th of July 2019, it says known offender. I'm not sure whether he's our friend who we've already had problems with, who is barred from the premises, enters the pub. The IP member of staff asks, "Why are you even here?" The offender picks up a pool cue from the pool table and acts as if to swing it. That having been reported, is that not an example of good management?
Yes, if the staff has contacted the police and informed us about it, yes. I don't think there's any dispute that it was something that this mismanagement by the staff. It's just actually a list of the crimes and incidents reported during a period of time.
Thank you, Inspector Story. I appreciate that. I just wanted some clarity on the issue. Can you confirm that the first time that my clients would have been aware of the historical incidents with this premises would have been when they received the review papers at the end of January of 2020?
I don't know, because I don't know what discussions Mr. Harrison had with your clients. Certainly, I know from the police side of it that may well have been the first time they were made aware. But as I say, I don't know what discussions Mr. Harrison had with his partners in the business over the last couple of years when we had meetings.
Oh, we'll certainly move on to that, but they weren't aware.
Right. Okay.
That will be our evidence. Thank you, Inspector Story. I've got no further questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Does Mr. Millen have any questions?
I don't really. I just think
you don't have to ask questions. You know, it's just a case of give you the opportunity. If you thought there was something there that you wanted to ask a question about, it's your opportunity.
No, I'm quite happy with the answers.
Right, Mr. Robinson.
So I'm just a bit concerned that Mr. Kirkpatrick isn't on this meeting at all. When he seems to be the one that's been liaising with us or Mr. Harrison, and yet he's not here at this meeting.
Mr. Kirkpatrick is on the line. I can confirm he is, Mr. Robinson. It's just that he doesn't have a camera attached to his device where he is, so you won't be able to see him. At the bottom of the screen, you may be able to see initials which say K and NK.
Yes, I can see that. Yes,
that's Mr. Kirkpatrick. I can confirm that Mr. Kirkpatrick is on the line.
Right.
I presume that Mr. Kirkpatrick will have the opportunity to address us.
Well, I was going to ask, did you want Mr. Kirkpatrick to come on now on the line so you can ask him the questions, Mr. Foster? Because Mr. Robinson seems as if he's got a question for Mr. Kirkpatrick. Do you want Mr. Kirkpatrick to come online now? Mr. Foster?
If the police sought any clarification from Mr. Kirkpatrick in regards to what's being said, it might be wise.
I think it would be helpful if we could. Mr. Kirkpatrick, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Is everybody else able to hear him?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkpatrick, can you just confirm for me some points that have been raised?
Sorry to interrupt, but can Mr. Foster ask the questions directly of Mr. Kirkpatrick?
Apologies, Chair, yes.
Mr. Foster.
Actually, Chair, I think it would be fair as part of the police's presentation that they have the opportunity to kind of depose their own witness before asking any questions.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Good point.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Mr. Kirkpatrick, can you just confirm whether or not you had any involvement with Mr. Milne and Mr. Robinson in relation to the concerns of the barking dog?
I know that I met with both the gentlemen at the barking dog. My recollection is I cannot remember if I informed them about the historical events, but certainly I was talking to them about what had gone on, and the CCTV, the refusals register, and anything else that might assist them in taking the premises forward.
Do you recall roughly what date that would be or month?
I can't, because I met with the two gentlemen at the premises on a, I think I rang Mr. Milne and said, look, can we meet at the premises? We just want a quick chat about what's going on, which we did. And Charles was also there, but I can't remember the exact date.
You mentioned their CCTV. Is that the CCTV that the committee has seen, or is that CCTV in relation to the October incident?
I believe that when I spoke to them, I said it needed an upgrade, and Mr. Harrison was going to put in a new camera, and I think Mr. Milne confirmed that to me. Question mark. I must admit,
apologies, Mr. Kirkpatrick. You might not have. You think you've misunderstood my question there. You said when you went and spoke to Mr. Milne and Mr. Robinson that you were referring to CCTV. Was that in relation to CCTV from the October incident, or just generally about CCTV system? I'll slightly rephrase my question in that respect.
Apologies. I think it was just in general.
In general, thank you. In relation to the concerns that's been raised about the advice that you gave in relation to the person who frequents the barking dog who's been a problem, obviously we're not referring to his name. Could you just confirm why that advice was given?
Certainly. Again, I agree with the inspector. I would not normally have given that advice. However, during our conversation, and I can't remember if it was Mr. Robinson or Mr. Milne that suggested that their bar staff were afraid of these unnamed people. So my suggestion to them was that if it would assist their bar staff, who they said were scared and afraid of these people, would it assist them if a drink, a means of calming them down, would assist them in then removing them from the premises by saying, look, give them a quick half, give them a pint, give the opportunity for them to leave, so that it would remove the confrontation away from the bar staff. Yes, it might cause something later on, but if it stops the bar staff being assaulted, I'm all in favour of that.
Thank you. I don't think I have anything further to add to Mr. Kirkpatrick ask. It may be that Mr. Foster, Chair, now wishes to ask his questions.
Mr. Foster, your questions?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Kirkpatrick, might it be the case then, in light of this advice and the assault on the 6th of October, that advice in fact played a part in that assault, and that the individual was served further to advice and was around to commit that assault?
Again, I can't comment because I wasn't there. I viewed the CCTV of the incident that night, and I can't comment on that particular incident. However, what I can comment on is the advice that I gave Mr. Milne and Mr. Robson, of the fact that if it appeases these people who are known associates and will go into the barking dog, then I will stand by my decision and my advice to give that to them. If it was to go ahead and they were going to assault somebody, well, one, why weren't the police called? Two, why weren't the police called afterwards? And three, why are these people continually being allowed into the barking dog?
In regards to this particular individual, we've heard from the from Inspector Story. This gentleman sounds like he's a prolific offender Would that be your description of him?
I've never met the gentleman personally, but that's what I'm aware of.
And isn't it the case that the premises actually reported this gentleman to Pub Watch?
Yes, they did in one of the Pub Watch meetings. Yes.
Is it correct that within Mr. Milne's statement, where he references that there was an opportunity by the police to slap an order on this individual, that opportunity was missed? Mr. Milne in his statement refers to a court hearing, the magistrates' court, where it was the police's plan to put in place an order that would prevent him from accessing any premises in the area.
You're on about an alcohol, yes. So as far as I'm aware, an officer put in a statement to the courts. Mm-hmm. I believe, and don't quote me on this because we've had two, either he turned up early for the hearing and pleaded guilty, but either which way the magistrates didn't impose that on this gentleman. Mm. So it wasn't I'm not trying to shift blame, but it wasn't the police's fault that when he went to magistrates court, it wasn't heard in the file.
No, I'm not suggesting it's your fault. I'm suggesting it's an unfortunate circumstance that that action couldn't be taken.
Oh, yes, you're totally correct. It is unfortunate that it couldn't be taken. What I will go back to is that this gentleman and his known associate keep going into and are served in the Barking Dog with no calls to the police.
And was that part of your advice that they should call the police when that happened as well?
Again, Mr. Milne and Mr. Robson will put me right on this. I cannot remember.
Okay. I've got no further questions for Mr. Kirkpatrick. Oh, sorry, no, I do have one more. At what point would Mr. Milne and Mr. Robinson been aware of the historical incidents in regards to the premises having taken over after Mr. Harrison's death?
Again, the two gentlemen will put me right, but I'm sure during our meeting at the Barking Dog, where we sat in the main lounge, I made them aware that there was an ongoing investigation, but I can't remember how in depth I went with them into what historically had happened.
Is it possible that the first time they were aware of it was when the review was served at the end of January?
It is possible.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick.
Thanks, Mr. Foster.
Mr. Robinson, did you have a question for Mr. Kirkpatrick?
No, he seems to have clarified it so far. Thank you.
What about Mr. Millen?
No, I'm happy with that.
Councillor Hunter?
No, thank you.
Councillor Samuel? No, thanks. Right. Right. In that case, I think most people have had the bite of the cherry, as it were. I'd just like to ask a few questions now with the police. You mentioned that a meeting took place on the 13th of November, and your concerns were based around the prevention of the crime and disorder and the protection of children from harm. Is it normal to leave a meeting like that without setting a date for review? Because I note that the next meeting you had was on the 19th of March, and that was after a further incident.
From what I recall, Councillor, what happened was we'd basically said we'd review the incidents over give it 6 months or so, unless there was other incidents that came in, and that my staff would be conducting walkthroughs, etc., just to check on potential underage sale of alcohol to kids, etc., just to try and basically see if there was any truth in the community intelligence that was coming in. I didn't give it an exact date. I think it was from recall. It was, I said at about 6 months sort of time. It would all depend. It could have been sooner if there was incidents that I needed to discuss sooner than that, or if there wasn't anything, maybe it's a little bit later.
Okay. And to your knowledge, were there any visits from the police throughout that 6 month period?
I think we did have a couple of licensed visits at the premises.
Were any concerns raised?
I can't recall off the top of my head, certainly nothing that we would have get. I would imagine not, because I would have probably get Mr. Harrison in a bit sooner. It was as a result of the further incidents that I've noted on my statement.
And
what I can say is we were getting the community intelligence was coming from other sources that I can't disclose those sources, but there's still intelligence coming in from several sources. It wasn't just one person, and people in the licensing trade type of thing. That was the place to go to get served alcohol in the function room of the premises.
And when was the change of DPS, I note that you didn't object. Was there a specific reason for that?
No. I mean, to be honest with you, Chair, obviously I manage half of North Tyneside, and I don't get told immediately. You know, I don't get told immediately. Sometimes it's several weeks or even longer when I have a chance to sit down and catch up with Mr. Kirkpatrick, because he obviously manages the whole of North Tyneside. So there's not a set weekly meeting process, etc. It's just as and when. And you know, I'll go if places are quiet, then there's no need for police involvement. But obviously, if things keep getting brought to my attention or incidents get reported, because I review crimes every day, then sometimes the pictures build up, as has been the case with the Barking Dog over the last couple of years, and that's, you know, that's when I have to take appropriate action, basically. So I'm basically go on information and intelligence.
On page 22 of your submission, well, I think it's page 6 of your submission and 22 of the bundle of papers. It mentions April 2017, underage drinking. The officer gave the bar manager some advice, which I thought was quite good. But is April 2017 the correct date?
Yes, I've checked that subsequently prior to this hearing, and yes, April 2017, Sergeant Paisley, who was one of my neighbourhood sergeants, put that information on a licensed premises visit.
So this was well before the actual incident which you were discussing. And,
yes.
And was 2017's thing mentioned to Mr. Harrison? Bearing in mind, Mr. Harrison was the DPS and the other lady was the bar manager.
I'm sure myself and Neil Kirkpatrick we would have a look, because there's an address history on the police computer system, and we'll put on all license visits and all incidents. Any crime and disorder goes on the address history. So we would have reviewed that before we had Mr. Harrison, and that would have been part of the first meeting where it was disclosed. You've actually, your premises has come on the police radar because of incidents getting reported, and we've had some community intelligence, and one of my officers prior to this, obviously, i.e. 2017, there's been things bubbling over for several months, if not going back a year or so now, and that was the basis of the meeting, the first meeting we had with Mr. Harrison, to say, listen, your premises is coming to notice for all the wrong reasons. You need to manage it. It needs to be managed better.
Right. On the 14th of October, same page, it says that a visit was undertaken to the premises. Are you aware who the visit was taken by? That was obviously the police, but who was it? You know,
Chair, can you just, the 14th of October 2019 is that?
Yes.
That was one of my police officers. That was off the top of my head. That was PC Steve Cook from one of my team, and that was at my request, just to ask. Let's have a little look at the refusals register. Can we have a little look to see if this, you know, that the refusals being complied with from the previous meetings that we had. So that was a check, if you like.
Right. There seems to be another technical hitch as well, because you mentioned that it's 14 months, and this was November 2018 since the first meeting was held. Is it not 11 months? Or, you know, I mean, I know that's nitpicking, but at that stage, were you not ready to actually say enough's enough at that stage and bring it to the committee for review?
We did discuss that. We had discussed it, and it was something that I was in two minds whether to do it. You know, whether we go now or we'll give it a little bit more time. In hindsight, I could have asked for the review a little bit earlier. Yeah, to be honest with you, but obviously, when the serious assault happened, that was what really reinforced in my mind that we need to come before this meeting today, this process today, to discuss it, because obviously prior to Mr. Milne and Robinson being here, there'd been no progress. In fact, things had declined even further since the very first meeting, and it was right. Okay, enough's enough. So let's go to the licensing hearing.
Right. In that case, I think I've got no further questions.
Chair, can I just clarify the 14 months that you referred to there? Yeah. I think that the 14 months is actually referring to November 2018 through to January this year. That is the 14 months size from the November to the time that the review was made.
All right, that makes more sense.
Thank you. That certainly is 14 months on my calculation anyway.
Right. Does anyone else have any questions that they haven't thought of the police? Mr. Foster.
Chair, you referred to a change of DPS. Can I just clarify, was that the change of DPS in May of 2019 to Christine Dunn, or was that the recent change of DPS?
No, that was the one
she was removed.
Particular time that I was referring to.
Okay.
Yes.
Chair, I think Mr. Kirkpatrick wants to come in.
Mr. Kirkpatrick?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to clarify the statement that you said about the change of DPS. The inspector wasn't made aware of he was made aware of the change of DPS to Mr. Milne, but when we have to check all the different systems we have, Mr. Milne was found to be a fit and proper person to then take on that role as DPS, if that clarifies it for you.
No, I was talking about...
You mean Mr. Robinson?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Mr. Robinson, again, thank you. Thank you for the clarity, yeah.
No, I was talking about the previous DPS, the lady.
To Christine Dunn. At that particular time, she was found to be a fit and proper person to take on that role.
Right, that's fair enough. Thank you very much for that. Right, no one else got any questions of the police? Right, in that case, I will now hand over to Mr. Foster for your rebuttal.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk about the premises in kind of general terms to describe how it trades. I'd then like to take some evidence from Mr. Robson, whose statement, risk assessment and training materials you have, and there it's there at pages.
Just before you go any further, Mr. Foster.
Yes.
Is this Mr. Robson the same Mr. Robson that's on your website?
Yes, he is. Yes, he works as a consultant providing personal license training.
So, though this is an independent report for the Barking Dog, it isn't quite an independent report for yourselves.
It is an independent report. It's done in his capacity as director of TJR licensing.
Right.
He does that on his own. It's invoiced to him. It's nothing to do with Minkoff solicitors. The work that he carries out for our firm is predominantly personal license courses, although we have recently carried out some training for Newcastle City Council as well.
Right. Thank you for that. That clarifies the situation for me.
I appreciate the point entirely, Chair.
Thank you. Can you now continue? Sorry to interrupt you there.
Yes, no problem. So, the premises trades as a local pub. It's set in several acres of sports fields and facilities within the Rising Sun sports ground. This is a council facility with a large car park which can perhaps accommodate 100 cars. It's actually used as a pickup car park for the local school. The premises is set back from the road through the gates, perhaps 200, 250 yards from the main gate, and you can see on the site location plan at page 46 of your bundle where it's actually located, but it may be that you're familiar with the premises. The premises plan for your information is at page 44. The premises is joined to some sports facilities which provide an office and changing rooms, and they're run by the council. There's some bench seating around the premises, at the entrance and by the smoking area at the rear of the premises. That seating is bolted to the ground. The premises is completely locked up with shutters and metal doors when it's not in use. But the gates to allow access to the site are open 24 hours. They're not closed. The grounds are used recreationally by residents, exercising, walking dogs, and participating in sport. Obviously, that's not happening at the moment. The premises which is licensed is split essentially into two rooms. There's the main bar, which is football themed, various Newcastle memorabilia, and there's the concert room, which is pretty much taken over by Wallsend Rugby Club. Includes their honours boards, their plaques, trophies, representative jerseys. Both rooms have their own bar, both have their individual accesses. The bar area, so not the concert room, is the one which is predominantly used at the premises during the day and on most nights. The concert room is less frequently used. It is used by the rugby club and other sports clubs and for functions. The booking of functions is a big revenue generator for the premises, like lots of other licensed premises across the country. If I could take you on to Mr. Robson's evidence. Mr. Robson, can you briefly explain your experience? Can you just
tell me what page that's on?
His evidence starts at, it's in the further submissions document. If you give me a moment, I will give you the page number. It starts at page 60.
Okay, thank you very much.
And there is a report from Mr. Robson, which goes to page 67. And then from then there's appendices 8, which gives is basically his CV. And then copies of the training which was implemented at the premises from page 70 onwards. And it is basically the full training materials were submitted, so there is a lot there. Chair, are you happy for me to ask some questions of Mr. Robson?
Yes, go ahead, yes.
Mr. Robson, can you briefly explain your licensing experience?
Certainly, Chair. I have had 30 years in Durham Constabulary, the last 14 years as a police licensing officer, of which my career and CV is outlined in pages 68 and 69 of the bundle. But primarily my role was dealing with organised crime groups in licensed premises and dealing with problematic premises and bringing them back online and making them conformist to the licensing objectives.
Mr. Robson, do you understand why this review was issued by the police?
Absolutely, and whilst listening to this presentation, I am fully in concurrence with Mr. Inspector Story's comments here, and I've been in that situation many times. Violence such as this cannot be tolerated, but with every ship there is a captain, and that captain is often the one which causes it to crash. And I think, as you'll find in my delivery, that is probably the cause of this.
So you made a statement to accompany the training which was delivered at the premises. It takes account of a risk assessment, and it's made some recommendations. Are you satisfied that the premises has delivered on those recommendations? They're at page 66, Chair.
Certainly, Chair. I attended on the 14th of February this year. I did a full risk assessment. I looked at the premises and what recommendations and ultimately conclusions, which are highlighted on page 66. My recommendations are highlighted also on that page. And I also delivered training at that time to members of staff, inclusive of Mr. Alan Milne. And from that, I made specific conclusions. Thank you.
Okay. And what were those conclusions, Mr. Robson?
Primarily, my main concern was during the course of my delivery of the training and my assessment that I identified that the current manager did not have a good working relationship with the police. That was very apparent. And I've known Mr. Neil Kirkpatrick now for a number of years, and as such, I know that he is a very skilled individual in his in the manner in which he deals with things, especially licensing matters. And this highlighted to me a concern, and that concern was that there is very clearly an issue with the management of the premises at that time. And the main point of my conclusion was, Chair, that individual was not a proper person to be operating in that premises as a manager.
Can you clarify in regards to your comments on CCTV? We didn't submit a revised statement, Mr. Robson, but you did view the CCTV, and at the time it looked like there was 9 cameras. Can you confirm that you've seen evidence to show that there was more than 9 cameras?
Yes, I believe 14. I did comment to Alan when I got outside and said you've got a lot of old cameras on the posts and such. But the good news is that the system that I reported in my document indicates 9 cameras, but there is actually, I believe, 14 cameras, which goes well in excess of the coverage for this venue.
I understand that there was a recommendation that a further 2 cameras would be installed in the concert room. Is that something that you would agree with in terms of coverage of that area?
Absolutely, Chair. It's quite clear that in the past there is evidence to show that the concert room has been a place where indiscriminate management has allowed young people to go and consume alcoholic drink. This is totally unacceptable. And if it was covered by an effective high-definition camera, it would actually prove any further offences or disprove any allegations of this in the future.
Mr. Milne and Mr. Robinson state that they were advised in regards to a particular individual who is a prolific criminal and was banned by the premises on Pub Watch, that one way of getting rid of him would be to give him a drink and then see him on his way, effectively. Is that something you would have advised in regards to your approach with people who were barred on Pub Watch?
I think looking at this one and I take on board fully what Mr. Kirkpatrick says here. You get a lot of people who operate in licensed premises who are very fearful of these individuals in the neighbourhood who could be very dangerous, and rumours and speculation about their criminality causes great fear in individuals who are lowly paid in a role of working on a licensed premises. However, again, management, it would have been good practice, if that had been said on that occasion, or to contact the police in a separate room and say, could you just do a quiet visit, walk around, and ask this guy to leave the premises, which is what I would probably have added on to that if the situation as such had arisen to me.
So that will be a further recommendation of yours, that the police should be informed when people are trying to get in from Pub Watch?
Absolutely. I'm your North East representative for Pub Watch, and I cover North Tyneside in this pub. And we profess to having a safe drinking environment, and that would be my advice, yes, Chair.
Have you had a chance to review the proposals made on behalf of the premises as attached at Exhibit 8 to Mr. Milne's statement, which you'll find at page 190, Chair?
I have, yes, Chair.
Mr. Robson, have you had a chance to review those measures which have been proposed?
Yes, Chair, I do believe that should they be accepted by yourselves, then this premises will very more than likely operate in a very safe and lawful manner in compliance with the licensing objectives.
And in your experience as a former licensing officer, Mr. Robson, have you seen premises with problems like this turn the ship around, to use your analogy?
Absolutely. I won't mention names, but I could mention quite a few premises where I've had very, very similar circumstances with some extreme acts of violence and weapons used, and they have turned themselves around and are now a public house within the heart of the community, which provides for all in that area.
Would you have any particular comments to make in regards to the reduction in hours on Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday?
I think one of the key issues here is there's a lot of premises in the area which have similar operating times. people tend to choose a premises by operate, hence nightclubs tend to attract a lot of individuals. When applications are made to just have even 30 minutes extension on the end of their time, people will choose a public house knowing that they will get 30 minutes extra on their time, just for 30. And as a result of this, that is the place that they will go to in the early evening and remain there until the close of business. In what you're saying there, Mr. Foster, by reducing the hours on this premises, it will give an inclination for people who may want to try and get access to this premises to go elsewhere. This does move problems elsewhere, I appreciate, but what this is all about today is ensuring that the barking dog operates in a safe and lawful manner.
Thank you. Is there any further improvements that you would suggest making, having taken account of those proposals at page 190?
At this moment, I think that continue with the training, ensure that police visits are welcomed, take an active part within the pub watch in the area, and make sure that the staff are fully compliant and operate in accordance with the expectations of Mr. Milne. And may I say at this point that having trained Mr. Milne and taken time to speak to him on more than one occasion, it's more than adequate to take on board this premises and to bring it back round to a state of excellent operation.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've got no further questions of Mr. Robson.
Right. In that case, does Councillor Samuel, do you have any questions for Mr. Robson?
Yes. I understand that the applicant for the licence, or the holder of the licence, is PJK Inns Limited, yeah? And I'm just a new, I think Mr. Robson worked for TGR licensing, is that right?
That's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Are the two organisations related at all? No. No.
If I may, Chair, there's no link whatsoever between TGR licensing and the company which operates this premises. I'm a sole individual director of this business, which I operate with my wife, and I've done so since December 2015.
Right, okay. So you didn't have any connections or any knowledge of the barking dog before you were brought in as?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever.
Okay, thank you for that. Cheers.
Councillor Hunter?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Police?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify a couple of matters. First off, probably the matter I want to clarify with Mr. Robson and Mr. Foster is just in relation to the conditions. The documents that I've got, I've actually got 3 versions of conditions in, and the page number of 190, there's actually then a further conditions at 192, where the CCTV condition at condition 5 has the password protection element in. Can I just clarify it's page 192 that we're referring to in relation to those conditions? I think there's been an error in terms of those previous ones, Mr. Foster, haven't been taken out. And I just want everyone to make sure that we're looking at the same conditions and that Mr. Robson is also referring to those conditions.
Can I just pop in on this point? Should the committee decide that this licence is allowed to move forward, the committee will set the conditions. These are just recommendations by this particular organisation. We will take into consideration all the proposals from all the various people, but the 3 councillors with our legal officer will set the conditions. So what you see on that paper is not necessarily what the conditions will be.
I appreciate that, Chair. I'm just wanting to clarify which conditions it is that Mr. Robson has seen and that he approves.
Just bear with me, I'll need to get this up because I haven't got it on my screen at this moment, Chair. Chair, I'm unable to get access to it at this moment in time to go through them in detail. Mr. Foster, if you could assist.
Yeah, they look like exactly the same set of conditions. The first ones were scanned across by us. You'll see page 190, 191, they're of slightly worse resolution. And the second set seem to be a cleaner copy of the same conditions.
Mr. Foster, could I just, condition 5 is different.
Sorry. On the page 192.
Yeah. Got it now. So are we specifically looking at Exhibit 8?
It's 100 page 192, not the one that's actually got Exhibit 8 written at the top.
Got you.
The difference being the password protected element. I believe that was added following a conversation that we had last week.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that it's Mr. Robson seeing those ones with that password protection in.
Yeah, I mean, well spotted.
Yes,
and obviously I appreciate the comments the chair makes, but I want to make sure as well that when we're referring to proposed conditions, that those are the conditions that the Barking Dog are putting forward. As I say, there is actually 3 versions of conditions in the application.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chair, we completely take the point that it's your job to decide what is appropriate for this application. These proposals are provided to confirm with you that we've put thought into this as to how we'll operate the premises, and that's how we're operating the premises now. And that we've discussed these with the police in the spirit of partnership working, which the Licensing Act obviously promotes.
Thank you. Chair, I just wanted that to clarify that point, as I said, to ensure everyone was referring to the same page. Mr. Robson, Chair, I just wanted to clarify that point so everyone knew which conditions it were that the Barking Dog were proposing, that everyone's working from the same page, which is obviously 192. I just have one question of Mr. Robson. Mr. Robson, in your experience, which is obviously quite detailed in your report as to what your experience is, both in terms of your company and prior as a police officer, do you understand the positions and the actions the police took in relation to the meetings and why the review was submitted at the time that it was?
Absolutely. As I said earlier, I fully concur with Inspector Story's actions and the report of his Chief Inspector based upon the Chief Constable's views in regards to the breach of licensing objectives. I would have done absolutely the same thing. But my job is to try and repair issues like this. And if I fundamentally believe an issue can't be repaired, and I have said that in the past, I will say so. Having spoken to Mr. Milne and Mr. Robinson, I'm fully confident now that measures are in place to ensure the objectives are fully maintained and not undermined.
And on the basis of which the police make their application, do you understand why the verification has been asked for?
Absolutely. It would be a standard practice that I would do also in this instance, especially with the severity of the injuries which have occurred outside of the venue.
Thank you. Chair, I have nothing further to ask.
Thank you.
Chair, could I clarify one further point?
Yes.
Mr. Robson, the way that the review's been approached by the police is a stepped approach to a review. Is that correct?
It is, yes.
And in a stepped approach to review, you will meet with the premises, you will air your concerns, you will agree action points, which are then reviewed at the next meeting. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and documented in writing was best.
Do you think, therefore, it would have been appropriate when new operators who hadn't had any involvement in the day-to-day running of that premises previously, that they were brought up to date on what had happened and the historical issues were discussed with them?
Yeah, absolutely. It is important that when new operators move into a venue, especially one which has problematic history, that they should be fully made aware of the situation in the past. Indeed, the violent premises I've dealt with in the past, they have all been new management, totally new management, which have took over and a clean brush.
And Inspector Story's been very, very gracious in saying that he is quite encouraged by what's been done and the responsibility that's been taken at the premises. Is that your impression of what's happened since Mr. Milne and Mr. Robinson have taken over the premises?
Yes, Mr. Milne and Mr. Robinson. Mr. Milne in particular, who I've put through his personal licence, gives me a greater chance to ask in-depth questions and to look at the personality of an individual during the course of the day of training. And on doing that training and delivering it, you identify whether there's any cause for concern. I'm more than happy with Mr. Alan Mill, who's now a personal licence holder, to be able to be part of the management and directorship and operation style of this venue. And I'm fully confident that there'll be little issues now with him at the helm.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions of Mr. Robson? I have a couple of nitpicking questions, to be honest. Is this a bespoke report of yours?
The appendix of my CV is bespoke, but the way in which I report is on its own individual basis, Chair. I'll look at each venue and assess it on its own individual basis and provide this report.
Yes, because I'm just wondering, on page 78, it mentions some place called Bart 22, and then on page 81, it's White's Hotel, and at the top of the page, and at the bottom of the page, it mentions Durham. And then on page 156, there's a lady mentioned on a thing who doesn't seem to be anywhere else in the papers. Could you explain that to me?
I'll have a look at page 156 first. So coming up to that now, page 156.
Wow.
That is a declaration of training in relation to a lady who was trained on the 17th of February. As the training had been delivered at that time to Mr. Alan Mill, that booklet is based upon a booklet which is the alcohol workbook, which is...
Yes, I've seen that, yes.
Yes.
That was very valuable.
I gave Mr. Milne a number of copies of this book, which were blank, and the individual would work through that book and sign the declaration on the back page to indicate that they have received the training. And I understand that that date, the 17th, that would be Mr. Milne who delivered that training to that lady. I'll stand clarified on this, but that there is the ability for Mr. Milne to deliver training subsequent to that.
That's correct.
Right. Is that correct, Mr. Milne?
It is, yes. We had
Right, that's solved that one.
Yeah, we had a new starter, and I delivered the training that I was given and provided by Tim.
Right, that's resolved that one. But the others are probably typing errors, or you just haven't managed to take them out before you copied and pasted.
That may be the case, Chair.
Right, that's resolved that. But I did like the booklet. I must admit, I liked the booklet, the training booklet. I thought it was very clear. It certainly isn't the standard that we as councillors get, because we get a lot higher standard than that. But I thought it was very clear. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Foster, do you have anyone else who you...
Just checking the microphone's on. Yes, I'd like to take some evidence from Mr. Milne. You're in receipt of his statement. His statement is at pages 162 to 172 of your bundle, with the exhibits at pages 174 to 190. The list of exhibits is CCTV, alarm records covering a set period, which show when the premises was open and when it was closed. The new incident and refusal forms, which were implemented following the training instigated by Mr. Robson. A disciplinary letter to the previous manager and now removed DPS. a letter from Mr. Milne to a member of staff in regards to her resignation. It's pertinent because it was her father who was involved in an assault at the premises. A photograph to show you the old incident and refusals record, because within the police statement it makes it sound as if it was just loose pieces of paper, when in fact it was a carbon book. So you fill it out and you get 2 copies of the same incident. So you can remove pages from it whilst keeping the integrity of the document. There is an article there from the British Beer and Pub Association. It's basically an article about how what dire straits the pub sector is in at the moment.
But would you agree with me, Mr. Foster, that in one sense is irrelevant to this present hearing, because this hearing is about the prevention of crime and disorder and the prevention of children.
Absolutely, Chair. It is about those things, but when you look at the Section 182 guidance, when it talks about implementing suspensions, for example, it does ask you to take account of the financial integrity of the premises.
Yes, but
I will touch upon that later in my presentation.
I think the 2 Licensing Act reasons have far higher standing than that document.
Than the Section 182 guidance?
No, not in the Section 182 guidance, but in that actual document itself, because that's about the protection of pubs for the future.
Yes.
No. Right?
Yes, you're quite right, Chair. It's just provided for information purposes.
Thank you very much.
And then last of all, within the exhibits of Mr. Milne's statement is the proposals that we've already discussed. So if I can take Mr. Milne through some points in his statement. At what point were you aware of the historical issues with the premises?
Well, obviously we had the meeting with Mr. Patrick, and during that meeting he mentioned that he was doing some investigations.
Is that the meeting of the 8th of August?
It is, yes. Yes. And basically we started taking an active sort of role, looking at what was going on in the premises.
Prior to that, and following the death of Mr. Harrison in April, the 30th of April, I understand it was.
Yeah.
What had been your management involvement in the premises?
It was zero. Basically, Paul Harrison was the manager of the premises. It was Paul's pub, in effect.
How long had he run the premises for?
Paul had, well, the PJ Cairns have run the premises for 25 years. Paul, 22, 23 years of that. And the majority of that time, certainly the first 21 years, I don't think the police even knew the premises was there. But obviously, subsequently, Paul unfortunately got cancer, which turned out to be terminal. And the last 3 years of Paul's life, looking at the police statements and some of the background stuff, haven't obviously gone too well.
And would you agree with the police's summary of the premises that it perhaps wasn't very well managed during that period?
I couldn't disagree, to be perfectly honest. Charles and I had obviously a meeting together once when Paul died. There was a manageress in the premises at the time, which we had no reason to believe there was a problem. And to be perfectly honest, until I actually sat down in August and started getting involved in the premises, because the place was losing money, I wanted to see what was going on there, that I could see there was issues.
Okay. You met with Mr. Kirkpatrick on the 8th of August, and we've covered what was said in relation to Pub Watch. What did you tell him?
I told Neil from the start, and actually the meeting was very good. It was amicable. We seemed to get on quite well, and I told Neil that I wanted to work very closely with him and the police, and if there was anything we could do to change things, we would. I also told him that there was things that I didn't like going on in the premises, and I said I would endeavour to change things at the Bottom Dog. And I would like to think that following that conversation, I started to change things, and hopefully the police can see that.
I think it was, as I say, very gracious of the inspector to acknowledge that there've been some improvements at the premises. And is that your feeling? Do you feel that the premises has improved during your tenure?
Without doubt. You know, I've been in the licence trade for over 35 years. I've dealt with licences and pubs most of me work in life, and I've put practices in place that I think can only improve it. We've had staff training, obviously. I'm on the staff's case constantly about different things. And I've tried to move people out that I actually don't want in the premises, to be fair. I'm actually starting to drink there myself and work there for weekend. And I want people in there that I think I could be friends with. I don't want any bother.
And have you had any incidents at the premises since the 6th of October, when there was that assault by the known individual?
We haven't. We've tried to stamp on anything that was bubbling under the surface. I'm very strict with all the staff in terms of Challenge 25. If anybody comes in that building now that looks underage, they either provide proper evidence of their age, or they're turned around and asked to move out.
What assurances can you give the committee that there'll be no lock-ins at the premises, as there has been some report of those happening previously, perhaps under the previous manager?
Well, to be perfectly honest, it will not happen on my watch, that's for sure. I totally disagree with lock-ins. I just think they're a recipe for disaster and trouble, to be fair. What we've done, obviously, we've taken action by upgrading CCTV. The alarm system's been upgraded. The CCTV, we've got great coverage in that premises now. We check that on a regular basis, Charles and I. We've also now get a weekly report from the alarm company, which tells us when the premises is opened and when the premises is shut to the minute. And at the end of the day, I have warned the staff, if I'm not there and somebody else is locking up, if they are there later than they should be, they will be dismissed.
I understand that you started working yourself in the premises in December. Is that correct?
It is, yes.
And further to that, I understand that you've retired from your previous job, so you're now full-time on the premises. Is that also correct?
It is correct. I mean, what I decided, obviously Charles and I, once again, was sat down and I looked at what was going on in the premises. I could see there was work needed doing. There's a lot of improvements needed doing. I mean, obviously, as I've said, 35 years of experience in the licence trade, I can see, you know, when a pub's being run properly. And I've decided to take early retirement to concentrate on the business.
We've mentioned the change in hours and the proposal to cut the hours down. When was that implemented?
That was just after Christmas, around the February time. What I was seeing, I've started to get a lot of my friends in there who are all sort of in their late 50s, early 60s. And to be honest, what I was noticing, that there was a very good atmosphere in the premises. And then, of course, 11 o'clock, 11:15, we were getting taxis pulling up with people who were coming into the pub. They were changing the atmosphere completely. They'd had their drink elsewhere, and I didn't like it. I really didn't like it myself, and I thought, I'm not having this. So I spoke to Charles and I said, look, this is what I want to do. I want to get rid of this 1 o'clock and take me down to 12 o'clock, because then anybody turning up, all I've got to say to them is basically, we ain't open late. You might as well jump back in that taxi and head off, because you won't be getting a late drink in here.
There's been some comments in relation to historically young people being able to get in the premises and drink in the premises. How have you dealt with that?
Well, as I mentioned, we've now operated a strict challenge 25. Anybody that looks underage or turned around, or they have to provide suitable ID.
And have you seen any evidence of underage drinking in the time that you've been involved in management of the premises since August?
Not at all. And as I say, I won't have it. What I'm trying to do is encourage, locals. I'm trying to encourage people of a certain age group, to be honest. Yes, I want a mix of ages in there, because you've got to have the younger element to sort of keep the pub going, and later on. But certainly, no underage drinking is going to happen in there while I'm on the premises. That's for sure.
Can you tell me what happened when you discovered that the premises had been kicked out of Pub Watch?
Well, to be perfectly honest, to say I was shocked is an understatement. I approached the manageress regarding this, because actually I think it was yourself that told me we'd been removed from Pub Watch. I hadn't been.
I think that was following a conversation with Mr. Kirkpatrick. Who I'm sure can confirm.
It was. Obviously, I went to see the manageress straight away and discussed it with her, and she admitted that that's what had happened. But of course, as normal, I got lots and lots of different excuses. Thankfully, via yourself and Mr. Kirkpatrick, I was given a number of the Pub Watch chairman. Unbeknownst to myself, it was a guy I've known for a good number of years, Ronnie Wonders. I spoke to Ronnie and asked him what had happened. And to my dismay, he told me that the manageress, the Bolton Dog, had been a real disruptive influence in the meeting. And he actually said to us, if she had stayed, there was a chance that the Pub Watch in the Wallsend area may have disbanded. It's quite embarrassing, to be honest. It's not something I would have expected. But hopefully, I was on the path to having the pub reinstated. Unfortunately, we had this lockdown, and that scuppered that.
Well, thank you. Were you ever approached by the police in regards to the incident on the 25th of August? This is the incident involving Ellis.
I wasn't personally approached by the police, but I do know about the incident. Ellis was a barmaid at the Bolton Dog. I like Ellis a lot. I had a lot of time for Ellis. But she started courting a lad from the yard. And what I understand was the boyfriend had said that he was coming home this night when she was actually working. She wanted to leave the premises early. She had an altercation with the manageress regarding hours, and was told that she had to stay until a shift was finished, which was 12 o'clock. I know in the review it states that she was asked to work beyond a shift, which is untrue. She was asked to work up to the end of a shift, which is 12 o'clock. As I said, there was an altercation between her and the manageress. She wanted her keys back, which she was refused. She was told to come back the following day and get them. And then later on that night, Alice's parents came into the pub. Her father was shouting and bawling, and Jeff was seen to pull his arms out to stop him coming any further and to try and calm the incident down, and he was pushed onto his back and he banged his head.
Thank you. The police alleged at the time, the night in question, there was a man in the pub who was barred on pub watch. Can you explain who this man was?
No, I've got to say that the information I've gotten was from the manageress at the time. However, I have had independent people verify it to me, but apparently the officer questioned the individual concerned, but it was actually his twin brother. The only way you can distinguish one from the other is one has a tattoo on his neck, and it was actually the brother who was in, and not the individual who was on pub watch.
Yeah. The kind of ridiculous explanation, Chair, that you can't really make up. It was his identical twin. But the police will be able to confirm that the case that this man, who we've mentioned previously, has an identical twin, knocking around in the same area. In regards to the man that we've mentioned, how much of a problem has he been to the premises?
Pretty big problem, to be fair, which is why I mentioned this individual to Neil Kirkpatrick on the 8th of August. As I say, the meeting was very amicable, and I told Neil that we wanted to work with him and the police, but the one person we had problems with, and I said if that person was eradicated from the building, we would be able to cut any incidents in that place considerably. And that's when obviously Neil gave the advice he gave.
What would the financial impact be on the premises should the licence either be suspended or revoked?
It would be devastating, to be honest. We obviously, because of the changes we've already made, there's been a reduction in the number of people coming into the premises, but that was our choice. We obviously had started to see that business turn around because of the people we've encouraged to come in, the rugby team, who we sponsor. That's come at a cost. We've sponsored the Tops. We also give them a percentage of any take in the concert room when they're in there. I've encouraged pool teams to come in. I've sponsored them also. Football team, I've sponsored them. We sponsor the pitch, darts teams, etc. And all of this has come at a cost to the business. And of course, this review, which I hold my hands up and say I can understand why it's happened, has come at a considerable cost to as well. You know, the Barton Dogs are not the busiest premises in the world, so yes, it would come at a big financial cost to us and probably ruin, to be honest.
What's the impact been of the lockdown on the business?
Well, it's been massive. Obviously, we're still paying bills. Charles and I, and as you would expect, are having to put money into the business to keep it going. And you know, it's like everything else. We don't know how long this is going to go on. So, you know, what it's like a leaky bucket at the minute, which is draining money.
Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Alan?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I've given me job up to run this business, and all I can say is if we keep the license at the premises, I will give it my best, and I promise that you know, we will run this business properly, the way it should be run, and you know, we're going to encourage people from the community. I want, this place is shut through the day, and I want to encourage members of the community to use it for keep fit, for meetings, for coffee mornings, etc., etc. I'm willing to open it up to the wider community and try and make it go this place.
Thank you, Alan. No further questions. Chair?
Councillor Samuel, do you have any questions?
Just a couple of brief ones, because certainly that was quite a comprehensive presentation we just had. On the hours of operation, could you just confirm, please, that you said you'd reduced the hours you're operating now from the ones that you're actually licensed to do. When did you start doing that from?
That was just after the Christmas period, around end of January, early February. As I say, it was a decision really I took, obviously in consultation with Charles, because obviously with working in the premises, I could see what was happening, and for me, I don't want to encourage people coming into the pub late, because it defeats the object. All you do is you chase away your good punters and end up with people who are already drunk and intoxicated. It's not what I want, especially if I'm drinking in there myself, to be honest.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. And when you said just after the Christmas period, then you actually said the beginning of February.
Beginning of February. Right,
beginning of February until the lockdown started, which was 15th of March. That was it. Yeah. So it was a relatively short period, but okay.
It is, yeah.
And you also mentioned that you had some discussions about being re-entering the pub watch scheme in Wallsend.
Yes.
How had these discussions got to, and who was having them?
Well, as I say, Neil Kirkpatrick thankfully gave me the number of the chairman of Pub Watch. I called him, had a discussion with him. As I say, I know Ronnie. I've known him through the business for a long time. And Ronnie was very happy to know that I was going to be joining Pub Watch. But he said, obviously, it wasn't his decision. It would have to go to the Pub Watch committee. But what he did say to me, and I'm sure Ronnie would back this up if you asked him, Ronnie said that he was going to have a word with the rest of the Pub Watch committee, explain to them that he knew me, knew my thoughts and the way I operate, and he was going to recommend that that they got me back in there. But like Ronnie said, he says, I haven't got a vote, Alan, but I'll do my best to get you reinstated.
Okay, and did this conversation take place before the beginning of February, when you reduced the operating hours, or after?
I'm sure it was before.
Okay. Yeah. That's all my questions, Chair.
Councillor Hunter, have you any questions?
I've got a couple, please, Chair. Mr. Milne, can I just say thank you very much for being so frank with us. I think it was really helpful. You've talked about you are involved in managing the premises, but I'd just like to be clear, who is managing on a day-to-day basis? Is it you, and how much is your involvement on a day-to-day basis?
It's me now.
Okay. Daily?
Yes.
Okay. And you also talked about regularly reviewing the CCTV with Charles. Regularly could be regularly once a year. I'm sure it's not regularly once a year. Can you just tell us how regular is?
Well, every time Charles is a stock taker by trade, and Charles does a monthly stock take, and that's when we review it.
Okay, so on a monthly basis.
Unless there's something we need to look at, of course.
And then you. Okay. Thank you for that. I have no other questions, Chair.
Police, have you any questions?
Yes, Chair, I just had a couple of questions. Mr. Milne, obviously the company involved in this is the PJK Inns. Could you just explain to me who's involved with that company and how?
And how?
Yes.
Yeah. There's Charles Robinson and myself and shareholder Linda Harrison, who was Paul's wife.
And prior to Mr. Harrison's death, who was involved in the company?
The three partners were Paul, Charles, and myself. But in terms of shareholding, the person who run the business was Paul.
And as a company, did you ever meet to discuss the businesses that you were involved in as a company?
The Barton Dog specifically was Paul Harrison's, to be fair. All that, the Barton Dog was left after the sale of the other pubs, and Paul wanted to run it and operate it. And Charles and I didn't get involved in it. I worked full time. Charles has got a full time business, and that's the way we said we would operate. Charles and I had no involvement in that place whatsoever until after Paul's death.
So as a company, did you ever receive any either annual or biannual reports in relation to how the Barking Dog was doing?
We got obviously accounts of how the place was running.
And you noted before that the accounts showed that they were losing money.
In the last couple of years, it showed that things were starting to take a downturn.
So did you not notice as a company when the Barking Dog started losing money that there may have been a problem earlier than when you received the review?
Not really, to be perfectly honest. I mean, as I say, it was run uniquely because it was all left down to Paul. Paul, it was his baby, basically. He run the business, and the fact that the business wasn't making a lot of money made no difference, because as it happened, Charles and I weren't getting any dividend shares out of it anyway. We just had shares in the place, and Paul got a wage, and that was it.
Do you accept that as a company and as a person of that company that you were responsible for ensuring that that premise ran effectively?
If the business was run as a normal business, I would accept that. But because the Barton Dog was run purely and specifically by Paul Harrison, I don't accept that, to be fair. I take your point. If I'd known, I'm sure if Charles knew that these things were happening in the last 3 years, we would have been intervened, that's for sure. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't really want my name associated with what's gone on in the past. I wouldn't have allowed it to happen.
And do you accept that there's been comments made that there's a new operator coming into effect, but really there isn't, because the company is still the same company that's going to be holding this premise license?
Well, it's still the same names, but I would disagree. I had no with the Barton Dog in terms of the business side of it at all, and nor did Charles.
There's just one other point that I wanted to raise with you, which was a matter in relation to the visit that took place on the 14th of October 2019. The officers obviously visited the premise and asked for the refusals register. And I just want to clarify a point with you. You say at the beginning of your statement, and you obviously said to the committee as well, that you've got a number of years' experience in the pub sector. When you said that you didn't know what the refusals register was that because you don't know what a refusals register is, or because you didn't know where it was in the premise?
I didn't know where it was in the premise, to be honest. And to be perfectly honest, I'd had a skim read through had a look through the premises license, and there was absolutely nothing in there which suggested we needed one.
Do you accept that? I appreciate that you weren't privy to some of the conversations, if we put it that way, and you weren't obviously at the meeting, but do you accept that the Barking Dog had been asked to put such things like incidents books and refusals register in as a form of good practice? I accept it's not on the conditions of the licence, but that had been a recommendation from the police.
From what I can see, that happened because I've actually found the refusals book. For what it was, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't to the standard I would expect but there was a refusals book there. That was provided.
Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say that was provided to Matt along with the new refusals book that we have in place. But yeah, hold my hands up. I don't think it was adequate, to be fair. But the new one certainly is, and that's the one that we use going forward if we were lucky enough to keep the licence.
And in October, when the visit took place and there was an ask for the refusals register, did no alarm bells start ringing that there was a reason why the police were coming to ask this information?
Yeah, well, of course. Of course, are you talking about after the incident where the two people? Yeah. Well, obviously, the alarm bell started ringing straight after that incident. So it was an abhorrent incident, and it's something that I find should never have happened. However, yes, the alarm bells were ringing, to be fair, and. If during the course of the meeting with Neil Kirkpatrick on the 8th, if he'd mentioned, that there was ongoing issues with the premises, if there was things that needed changing, we would have changed them. Without doubt, I told him at the time that we wanted to work with him and with the police, and I'm still of that mind. I'm not daft. I've been in the business for a long time. I know things weren't right, and we're looking to put them right.
Do you accept as well that as much as it is the police communicating that, it's also the responsibility of the person who owns the premise to ensure it's run responsibly?
Without doubt.
And did you have any conversation with the DPS at that current time in October as to what the problems, or if there were any problems with the premise?
We carried out a full investigation at which she was suspended.
But that suspension happened this year. I'm referring to October last year when these matters started to, if we say, bubble to your attention when the visit and the incident in October. Did you not think to have a conversation with the DPS at that point as to what the issues were at the premise?
Yeah. Well, we did have conversations at that time.
And did they not raise the extent of what the problems then subsequently have been highlighted as a part of this review?
Well, which is why we've taken all the actions we have taken. If you look at what's happened since October, that place, we've getting rid of a lot of people. We've started to bring in clubs and teams to try and change the whole ethos of the place. I wanted to be a community place, and yes, obviously, I realised that there had been problems from the meetings I had with the manageress, etc. And, it's just a shame this lockdown's happened, because I'm sure Inspector Story and Mr. Kirkpatrick would have seen a huge change in that business.
Do you accept that it could be seen to the police that a lot of these changes that you've implemented have been implemented since the review was put in, and therefore has been a response to the review, rather than a response to you taking over and recognising issues with the premise yourself?
No, not at all. Not at all. As I said, I now drink in the premises, and I can assure you there's absolutely no way I would drink in the premises that I wasn't happy with and comfortable with.
That's all the questions I had, Chair. Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions, but I don't know whether you'll be able to answer them, right? And it's a sort of a combination one. On page 168, right, paragraph 37, it's 25th of August 2019. Then there's the various bits underneath. It's more about the date than anything else, because if I look at the refusals scraps of paper, register, I can't tell the page, but it's number 8, refusal. It states the 24th of August and it states a Sunday, right? Now, if I'm not mistaken, the 24th of August was a Saturday rather than a Sunday. So did it take place on the 24th of August or did it take place on the 25th of August? And the reason I ask this is because of the difference in the licensing conditions of serving being open. And you want Mr. Foster answer that one? Or is it a typing error?
Sorry, Chair. Sometimes I think you'll find that when you've got incidents which are reported, it's put down as one day when it's actually the morning of the next day. That could be what's happened.
Right. Right.
So, for example, it will be the Saturday trading day going into the Sunday morning.
Right. I'll accept that.
And it's sometimes what the police will tell you the same thing. It sometimes provides some confusion when you're listing incidents and when they've happened, because you're saying it happened on a Sunday, but it happened in the early morning of the Sunday, so it was actually the Saturday's trading day.
Right.
Obviously crossing midnight.
Right, that just clears that up for me. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions of Mr. Millen? Mr. Callum, do you have any questions? No? Then
just the one, sorry, Chair, just one question. Mr. Millen, just if the, obviously following this review, if the premises licence, and Mr. Foster might be able to confirm this as well, you say that you're running on the day-to-day basis. Will you be putting an application in to vary the DPS?
Yes, Gary, that will absolutely be the case. When the previous DPS was suspended, we obviously had to replace the DPS straight away. So Mr. Robinson was put down as the DPS, and around the middle of February, Mr. Milne sat his personal licence course. There was a delay in getting his criminal records checked back. I'm sure you'll be familiar with these from handled personal licence applications. Sometimes they come through in a matter of days. Sometimes they come through in a matter of 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. It was one of those. So we didn't get his DBS check through. And in fact, it was then lost in the post. And then we subsequently submitted it to the council. So Mr. Milne now has his personal licence, and it is the intention that he'll be appointed as the DPS.
Okay, thank you.
But obviously he got his personal licence around the time that lockdown came.
Yeah, that clarifies that. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you very much. I've just thought of one question which has popped up. You mentioned the alarm and the fact that you get weekly reports.
Yeah.
Right. Should the licence be allowed? Would you be quite happy for that weekly report to also be available to the police and our licensing department should it be requested?
Without doubt.
Right, thank you very much. No one else? Then do you have any further situation or people to introduce?
No further evidence, Chair. I'm guessing just closing remarks from the police and then me to follow up.
Unless there's any questions that people think they've missed, if any.
Would you mind, Chair, if at this point I asked for a 5-minute comfort break? Would that be possible?
Well, looking at the way people are wriggling, I think it's possibly necessary. so yes, a 5-minute. I mean, we'll leave it open, just come and go, and then we'll reassess.
Thank you, Chair.
No Can we close the live stream for us, please, for 5 minutes?
Close it down for the, yeah. Yes, you can do that. yes, I keep forgetting about that. Thank you very much. Can we go to summing up? Mr. Callum, do you have anything to say?
No, Chair, I've got nothing further to add.
Right, then can I refer to the police now?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just for the purpose of yourself and the other two councillors, I've provided a skeleton argument on behalf of the police. The purpose of this is just simply to shorten my submissions, given that we're conducting this over a video platform. The skeleton argument's being provided to Mr. Barton and Mr. Foster, who agreed that Mr. Foster kindly agrees that the document can be used in that manner. I don't know whether or not it's been sent to you yet, but obviously if it could be sent so that you can have that as part of your deliberations. Councillors, for that purpose, in relation to that, all I've set out is the legislation under which the review is brought, reminding yourselves of what the licensing objectives are and the steps that you have to in relation to this application. And I'll just mention those again, that they are able to modify the conditions of the licence by altering, omitting or adding conditions as you see fit, exclude a licensing activity, remove the designated premise supervisor, suspend the licence for a period of not exceeding 3 months, or to revoke the licence. Councillors have also set out in relation to the skeleton argument the documents that you've had in relation to the application, and also that you've heard evidence in relation to Inspector Story, Mr. Kirkpatrick, and Mr. Robson and Mr. Milne, who's also provided answers to the questions that have been asked both by the police and by yourselves. Council have also then set out in the document a number of points that I would refer to in relation to both North Tyneside's licensing policy and subsequently the Home Office guidance in relation to Section 182 guidance that I'd ask you to consider when you make your deliberation in relation to this matter. Chair, the police in their application to review the premise licence for the Barking Dog asked the licensing authority to consider revoking the premise licence. And this is brought on the fact that the police believe the Barking Dog has compromised the licensing objectives of prevention of crime and disorder and the protection of children from harm. You referred to in the skeleton argument to 11.17 and 11.18 of the Home Office guidance above, which is in relation to warnings that can be given in relation to a premise. What I would ask you to consider that in relation to the Barking Dog, the police have given numerous warnings about the improvements that needed to happen in relation to this premise. It's accepted by the police that revocation of the premises licence is the most serious action that can be taken when reviewing a premise licence. However, on behalf of the police, there have been a number of serious concerns relating to the Barking Dog, with, in the view of the police, limited improvements seen until the application for review was submitted. The police have tried to engage with the management and the previous DPS of the Barking Dog since 2018 in order to improve the problems at the premise without the need for this review application to be made. In addition to that, the police would submit that the extent of the number of concerns warrant serious action to show not only to this premise but others in the local and surrounding area that the matters will be taken seriously and will not be tolerated both by the police and also by the licensing authority. Councillors, in relation to the skeleton argument, I then set out in paragraph 24 a number of matters that I ask you to consider when looking at this premise and why we say that revocation should be what you consider. If I can just summarise them, but as I say, they are in detail. You've got a number of incidents, the 26th of October, which you saw on the CCTV, numerous reports of lock-ins at the premise, lack of sufficient record keeping, although it's accepted that this is not a condition, but good practice advice was given by the police in relation to this. There's obviously the reports that have been received in relation to underage drinking, which continue to be received after a discussion with the management of the premise. The lack of the refusals register and not taking up police advice on that. Again, it's accepted that this isn't a condition, but advice had been given. The inability of management to act in a swift and timely manner manner upon the advice given in 2018, which was shown by the lack of sufficient changes in March 2019. The incident in March 2019 of an assault, a further assault in August 2019, the failure to prevent banned persons and pub watch scheme remaining on the premise, and lastly, the incident in October 2019, and then lastly, the management and staff not taking their responsibilities at the premise seriously. In relation to the what you've heard, that this is a new operator, there's new people coming into the premise, what I would say to you is this isn't a new operator, this is still the same company who were managing the property prior to this review coming into play. You've also heard that revocation would have a detrimental impact on the financial impact of the premise. And I'd refer you to specifically paragraph 11.23 of the Home Office guidance, where it says it will always be important that any detrimental impact that may result from a licensing authority's decision is appropriate and proportionate to the promotion of the licensing objectives and for the prevention of illegal work in licensed premise. But where premise are found to be trading irresponsibly, the licensing authority should not hesitate, where appropriate to do so, to take tough action to tackle the problems at the premise, and where other measures are deemed insufficient, to revoke the licence. Councillors, I would ask you to take this into consideration, that this has been a premise that has been found to be trading irresponsibly, and therefore tough action should be taken to show that this is not acceptable and should not continue. Lastly, you've been provided with a document attached to Mr Milne's statement, which is dated the 7th of May in relation to the future of pubs in relation to the current lockdown. I would ask that you give this little, if any, no weight when you're considering what to do in relation to this premise licence. This isn't unique just to the Barking Dog. This is an issue faced by every premise licence across the whole of the United Kingdom, and any financial impact in relation to the coronavirus shouldn't be borne in mind in relation to your deliberations. Councillors, as I say, there's a full submission provided with relation to guidance in my skeleton argument. I don't intend on reading that out. It goes into 8 pages long. Unless there could be anything further I can assist with, those would be the submissions on behalf of the police.
Thank you very much. Mr Foster.
Thank you, Chair. This review has been made on the basis of two of the licensing objectives: the prevention of crime and disorder and the protection of children from harm. Your own statement of licensing policy has recommended measures in relation to crime and disorder at paragraph 10.4 and in relation to protection of children from harm at paragraph 10.27. And you'll see that in some respects they mirror the proposals that we've put forward within our documentation. To revoke this premises licence goes against the trend of improvement demonstrated by the lack of incidents since Mr Milne and Mr Robinson have taken over the premises. It goes against the obvious improvements which have been made at the premises at some expense to the respondent. The reality is that this is a much loved and much liked and now better run premises. And the longer we're able to operate this, the more clear that's going to be. We appreciate that requires an element of faith from the committee, and we hope that we've been able to provide that to you, the evidence that we've given thus far. There have been some issues at the premises, but the improvements show the amount of care and attention given to the premises both before and after the receipt of the review. This is a valuable asset to the local community and the local sports clubs. We can understand why the review was brought, but it's a little puzzling that the police weren't engaging with the call them new operators, but you understand what I'm saying, Mr Milne and Mr Robinson, when they took over the premises. They knew they'd taken over, and it should have been clear from initial conversations that they weren't aware of the historical issues at the premises. It seems, however, that the police had pretty much made up their mind in October that the review was going to be instigated, and it took us till January to received that, and there seems to have been somewhat of a disregard for the improvements which have been made. But the inspector was very gracious in saying that he was encouraged by the improvements which have been made at the premises, and one of the committee members was quite right to ask why they're still so steadfastly sticking with their request for a revocation. Whilst the premises have made improvements, there are more improvements that the premises can make. There is a willingness to invest further in the premises, and that will be done going forward. I'm not going to go into the proposals in any more detail, as I was going to go into them, but I think we've done them to death. Suffice to say, the previous manager has no further involvement in the premises. I'd like to make that absolutely clear. In regards to the section 182 guidance, paragraph 11.20 says that it's for the committee to establish the cause or causes of the concerns that representations identify. So we would say that was, and I would imagine the police would agree that was poor management of the premises, which we hope that we've addressed, and I hope we've made it clear how we've addressed it, and that you should direct your action at those concerns and at those causes, and your reaction to that should always be no more than its appropriate and proportionate response to address the causes of concerns that instigated the review. It gives paragraph 11.21, for example, gives the example of removing the DPS, where the cause of the identified problem directly relates to poor management and decisions made by that individual, which we have done. Decisions that were not initially obvious to Mr. Milne and Mr. Robinson when they took over, because they weren't involved in the day-to-day running of this premises. Problems that the police seem to be aware of and have failed to notify the operators of. I appreciate the stepped approach that the police took initially in regards to the review, and we've addressed that. But after Mr. Harrison's death, that information was effectively lost to the operators. The opportunity has been there since for more contact to be had with the police, and we hope that that relationship can continue should the committee decide that the licence can remain in place. The police have asked for revocation. With respect, that's not their role. Their role is to provide you with information, and it's your decision to make in terms of whether a premises licence will be revoked. And you've heard what the options are and what are available to you. The course of action that you must take must be appropriate and proportionate to the circumstances. And from what you've seen from Mr. Milne's and Mr. Robinson's involvement in the premises, my position would be that appropriate course of action is to put conditions on the licence and to have regard to the proposals that we put forward, not to go down the route of a suspension or a revocation of the licence, although I appreciate those are options available to you. The police say that no account should be taken of the financial position of the premises. I disagree with that, but it's for you to take account of paragraph 11.23, which addresses that particular aspect. They say that there's no account should be taken of the current crisis we're in, but this is affecting everybody and everything. And the impact now of a further, say, suspension of the premises licence would be much more acutely felt, because the premises has already effectively been suspended since the 20th of March. So there has been no money coming in, and the business is in dire straits. To suspend the licence would effectively be to revoke the licence. It would have the same impact on the premises. The business would fail. We are aware that we are asking for a chance, and to have a little faith in in Alan and Charles. They are good operators whose actions speak for themselves, and they are aware that should you choose to let them keep this licence, that this would be their last chance. But we're confident that should you decide to do that, that they will impress you with the way in which they'll operate this premises and continue to operate it without creating any problems for the local community, which they dearly want to be part of. This premises is and should be a local community venue and asset. I've got no further submissions unless there's any further questions.
Has anyone got any questions? No. No further questions, and thank you very much. In that case, I will just ask people if they are happy with the way the meeting has been conducted this morning, given the technical nature and the virtual reality situation of it. It's very difficult to, so is everybody happy with that? Anybody not happy with that? No, then thank you very much for your attendance this morning. What happens now is the 3 councillors, the legal officer and our democratic support officer, who takes notes on that for us, and we get advice of Mr. Barton. We'll go away, we'll make a decision, and I believe Mr. Parkin might want to make a statement about when you'll actually get the decision. Mr. Parkin?
Thank you, Chair. Once the panel have made their decision, I will email both parties with the outcome of the hearing, a basic, the subcommittee have decided to revoke or not revoke, and then that'll be followed up in writing with the reasons for your decisions in 5 working days, Chair.
Okay. Anyone got anything else?
I'd just like to thank Mr. Parkin for putting all of this together. I know it's been a lot of hard work on his part.
Just want to echo that sentiment on behalf of the police as well.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I just ask one technical question, just for our deliberations? Do we have to log out of this meeting, and will there be another notification sent?
There will, Chair. There will be, yes.
Right,
yes,
okay,
so we
fine.
log out of this, and then the 3 councillors, Mr. Barton and Mr. Parkin, are invited back into yet another meeting, and we keep our fingers crossed that the technology works.
That's fine. I just have the notification for that one, yeah.
Yes.
Chair, are you happy for the meeting to close and for us to switch the live stream off?
Yes, we can switch the live stream off now. Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.